Sonya and Leighton, thank you for taking some time to join me on the show.
Thanks, Owen. Nice to be here.
Thanks. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's a shame we're going to attempt the first four-way podcast across the Tasman, but it's the three of us here, and we're going to be talking about the Sharesies business that you've built with the team, how, why, when things went wrong, when things went right, and so many other things. But many people who know the Sharesies brand will know from social media, from whether they're using it as their brokerage account, investing in local, international, New Zealand shares, whatever, they'll know that there's a pineapple for a logo. And I actually have some socks at home that Brendan, shout out to Brendan, country manager for Australia, gave to me at an event, a ladies finance club event. And I was very grateful. And they're very comfy socks, I might add. And they have pineapples on it. And I love the pineapples, and I love the logo and the design of the whole Sharesies platform. Sonya, maybe you can fill us in. Like, why did you choose a pineapple?
Yeah, and I'm glad you've got some socks, especially coming into the colder months. So the reason we've picked the pineapple is really important. You know, we wanted something that captured people's attention, but also gave a bit of information about what we're about and easily recognizable. And I don't know if you know, but the pineapple actually is a really nice metaphor for what we're trying to create with Sharesies, and it's got a super interesting history. And so if you go back in time, pineapples were really rare and expensive, and people used to hire them if they were having a dinner party, and you know, as a table table setting, and then give them back afterwards. And as well, you'll see in old buildings, pineapples are often in the facades, and they really were only for the rich. And then over time, pineapples have gone on their own democratization journey, where and it's a nice symbol of hospitality, of prosperity, of wealth. And now we're at a place where you can buy it in a can and eat it on a pizza if you like. And so we liked that journey that the pineapple had gone on as a bit of a symbol from something that was once for the wealthy and is now widely accessible for us.
Yeah, I love that. A lot of people get stuck on logos, and they hear stories like this when they start their business, and they think, I need to come up with something like this. So then, from 2017 till now, that people can still be asking about the logo. But I oftentimes say to people, don't overthink of it. Just kind of get into your business and just get started. But obviously, this has got a great backstory, and so it's well chosen. Might stick with you for a moment. So, as I said, most people who buy and sell shares or ETFs will know the Sharesies brand. But what was the motivation or inspiration behind starting the business? And then maybe we'll come to how it started.
Yeah, great. So the motivation was really, so we started around the end of 2016. And at the time, the media around New Zealand was a lot to do with millennials not being able to buy houses because they spent all their money on smashed avocado on toast, and which was just such a yarn, right? Like, I think house prices were rising, it was getting further out of reach, and the advice that existed was get on the property ladder. There a lot of it was, when you thought about investing, it was property, but that was getting so out of reach for so many people. So started thinking, what's the good news story here? How are people starting out today going to get ahead? And investing in anything else was just too hard. So a group of us, 6 of us, got together. I had the original idea, which was, I would love to invest. I would love to see my friends investing. How could we do this online, small amounts, in a really fun way? 6 of us co-founders got together from a range of different backgrounds, decided this was a mission that everyone cared about too. How do we, what would this world look like if more people could get access to wealth without having to have heaps of wealth to begin with? So we started working on that idea. We went around, we talked to people, because it's one thing to have an idea, it's another thing to have a business off the back of that idea. And the key thing in that is that it's something that people care about, and it's a problem that people have. And those interviews, we all went out and talked to people about money, about how they felt about money, about their life, how money played a role in their life. And after those conversations, it was pretty hard for us to turn away or to not be excited by that as a big grunty problem, or opportunity, really, because what we found from that was most people didn't consider themselves to be investors, or that investing was something that they could do. But I think it was something like 99.9% of people said they wanted to be an investor, and it's something that they would do if they could. But the main barriers were that they were priced out, jargoned out, and branded out, that the solutions that existed just didn't meet the needs of the majority. So we went to work and started building this platform together that met those needs, and we worked quite closely with our customers, or a small group at the time, of people, and continue to evolve our product as we have done over the last 6 or so years. We're still continuing to evolve what we do.
I love it. So I can't think of any other business, any business that has started with so many people making that decision to go and do that. So maybe this question for you, Leighton, is just how did you all come together? Like, how did you know each other? How did you come together? And how did you all decide that, yes, I'm going to take a risk on this thing, like a career risk, a financial risk, all that stuff, and do it?
Yep, pretty loosely, unstrategically, and organically, I would say, which I think is potentially a good lesson for business. Like, some of the things we often get asked about, tips for people or anything like that, and I think it's, there's not a set of rules is probably one of the best things that I think anyone can ever realize. Like, all the rules came about from some precedent, which maybe didn't need to be a precedent. So in Sharesies' case specifically, you touch on the number of us, 6 of us, and it really wasn't liked, particularly by the investing community, and by that I mean like sort of angel investing type community. And we got a lot of, and I use community as a very broad term there, because there were people who sort of were very supportive and couldn't have cared less, but by and large we got a lot of feedback on that as something that would hurt us down the track. But so starting with like the connection between us, so Sonya and I worked at Kiwi Bank, which is one of the, it's a New Zealand government owned bank, and we'd sort of been there for a few years, and we've done quite a lot of work together, and we got connected over this investing topic. Really, I had an investment club where we put $50 a week away, so it sort of became like a proof point or a conversation point that, hey, you can actually invest with $50, but how do we make this available to a lot more people? And then like Brooke and I, we weren't married at the time. We are now, but we were a couple. So and we'd already decided that we were going to start a business and didn't really know what that business was. We'd thought about things in financial education. We had a bit of a graveyard of domain names and company names and registered business stuff. We had one called My Manage Air, which was going to manage Airbnb for people. There's like all sorts of random things, and then like Sonya's partner Ben was our designer. So again, relationship there, and then Richard and Martin, so they were running a consultancy together. They were our technical founders, and Martin and I played in a brass band together. And they'd sort of talked to me about coming to work with them in their consultancy probably a few months before, and at the time timing wasn't right. So it's all sort of, like I say, quite organic and just happened. And then we ended up in a room for a conversation one day to talk about it. And I don't really feel like there was ever a decision. Maybe Sonya, you can remember differently, that we're going to work on it together. Like, I don't think that was like a conversation we had necessarily. It just sort of got legs in some way of what if it could. So I think Brooke, Sonya, and I did make a decision. Like, we were sort of like, well, let's. There's an accelerator coming up, and we decided we were going to do the quit our job things and take off to do that. And then whilst we were doing that early discovery stuff, we sort of had lots of conversations still with Ben, Martin, Richard, and they joined us not that much longer. Maybe, they were sort of there having chats, but they probably made the jump into being full time and taking that full risk 3 or 4 months later. And yeah, like I say, I think we were all at a point in our careers where we felt a need to take this. Like I think everyone there knew that we might have an opportunity here, and that the problem was big. So on the other side of that, potentially something that we had the skills to solve for. And yeah, outside of that, honestly, it's so hard to give much more of a recipe for it, because it just, there wasn't one. It just sort of fell together, and we just kept talking. Conversations happened, and I guess ultimately we all, the six of us, made the decision to quit our jobs and go full time, and that's how it started. It's like, once you've made that commitment, you're in there. And there's lots that happen after that to make it work with six people, I think. Like, but the actual coming together was easy.
Okay. Did a lot of the literature from, at least from the VC, seems to suggest that like two founders is a good combo. And as a single, I don't really refer to myself as a founder, but like if I was a business owner, I'm a single person in this. So I do envy anyone that has the sounding board. This is maybe a question for either of you, but in those early days, did you guys have any doubts about doing it as a group? Or was it like, no, everyone's kind of brings something unique and the differences can be sorted out, and we're all pretty respectful, kind of like similar values type people?
Yeah, I never had any doubts, and I don't. Sonya may have different thoughts here, but not on the group.
Every day. No,
but not on the group aspect of it. Honestly, I still can't imagine how you do it without that. Like, I think the buy-in of, look, we were trying to build something that was needed to, we call ourselves a fun tech, right? And it's like, so, and fintech just captures part of what you need to be. You also, like, we add the fun because it needs to be creative, particularly if in retail, and you need to have something that really engages with people. So we needed, like, we're dealing with people's money, so you cannot, whatever term you want to use there, up the technology side of it, right? It needs to be safe. It needs to move money correctly. You need people who understand it well enough, or are good enough problem solvers, or have had some history in problem solving, both in financial services and in technology, to think about how you could create that. And then you need to have exceptional design and thinking around that to make sure that you're delivering an experience that's valuable to people. So I don't think any one of us had that individually. So like the thought of doing that myself is quite terrifying, actually. If I have fears, it's like the idea that it might have ended up with just me in some way. And the fact that we had this group around us was absolutely, like, they used to refer to Brooke, Sonya, at least, as sort of whack-a-mole. It's like you might get one of us down, but maybe you'd be lucky and get two of us down at a time. But one of us would always pop up and say why, hey, we can get through this, and why that goes. So a lot of confidence around that. And then like only in the last year, so Ben's now sort of not working at Sharesies anymore. He's decided that full-time dating's for him, I think, and or at least before he gets onto whatever his creative thing is. And we still talk a lot and engage, but up until then, 6 years that all of us had been there, and we'd all been sort of leading the business as executives, and just that extra buy-in that you get from everyone when that's your role as well, and you feel like, so I don't think any one of us would feel any more committed or dedicated to the business than the other, because we've all got reasonably even shares in the ownership of the business, and been there from the start in all this context. So yeah, I can absolutely see how it can go wrong. You hear lots of stories of two founders where it goes wrong, right? Maybe it's even harder with two sometimes, but I don't think we were different enough in skill set, probably similar enough in values, to your point earlier, and brave enough to have those conversations early on, and appreciate that if we've all got the same view, then why would we all be here? Like, if conflict's just been a natural part of us building the product right from the start. But I think we all respect that as something that's very necessary, as opposed to something that's holding us back in any way. And then, yeah, I was just going to say one thing. Just finally on that is, like, I think we're also very good at just, if there is some disagreement there, which, to be honest, often there is, ultimately we decide on whatever factor we use, or whoever's decision it is, and then we get behind it. And I don't think there's ever been doubt around the fact that even if there is some doubt or some disagreement, then ultimately we'll all be there to tell the story and work towards, well, New Zealand, we talk about being on the same waka. Australia might talk about the canoe or whatever that is, but we'll make sure we're rowing in the same direction. Sorry, Sonya.
Yeah, great, Leighton. And I think to just round out, like, no doubts at all. And if anything, it was a source of comfort. And I think, what you were saying, Owen, around the different setups, being on your own versus being in a partnership versus being in a team. And I think those different relationships have different dynamics at play. And I'm a fundamental believer that business is a team sport. So it's going to end up being a team anyway. And so it was really nice to start from a position of we. And I think partnerships can quickly get you and I. And I think that partnerships can turn in that way. And as Leighton said, lots of infrastructure went in to support that team operating really well. And but it was challenging, but it was also a real power up to be on a team from so early on.
Sonya, do you have any ideas, and maybe you don't, maybe I'm just catching you off guard here, do you have any ideas if like a single person business owner or would-be founder was to come to you and they say, I don't have anyone in my immediate circle that I know, like what should those types of people be looking for? Who should they be looking for? Should they be looking for anyone?
Yeah, I think that depends on what you need. Like if you're asking the question, so this is really if someone wanting to grow their, and get more people supporting them. Is that a thing? Yeah. So I definitely think it's like if you're asking that question, the answer could be no. Cool. Like keep doing what you're doing. But I think if the answer is, I think more here would help us expand or grow in this way, then it's what do you need? I definitely know of people who have established a business on their own and brought on a co-founder relationship later on because they really wanted a partner and a peer and someone, because it is a different dynamic to bringing in someone working with you. So I know someone who's done that and has felt great about doing that and has seen the business grow. And because equally that's about that other person being as bought in as you are and continuing in that way. I don't know many people have brought in so many people afterwards.
I can't think of anyone.
Yeah,
other than maybe like law firms or partners. They come on as like, in a partnership model. It's a bit different. Yeah. Now that's cool. I just had to ask that because it's so unique in the industry, not just finance, but I guess any industry, I should say. So, Leighton, people know Sharesies. Like I've got the app on my phone, right? I can buy and sell shares, ETFs. I can automate stuff. But that's like what we see as investors using the platform. Can you describe how the business model works? Like how you guys built it? How you thought about like pricing these things without excluding people? Like you mentioned, that was like a key barrier for people when you set out. So can you just describe kind of what I would call the economics of a business, like how it all comes together?
Yeah, I mean, the business model in a phrase, I suppose, is probably motivated and confident investors. So that means that that's how we make money. Like our value is providing something that gives access, confidence, motivation is what we talk about as a strategy. The access in itself is actually probably quite a small part of that, right? Because if you have access, to be honest, there's been access in some shape or form for a very long time, right? There's one of the things we've done is broken that down to much smaller dollar amounts possibly, but still, if you really wanted to do it, you could save up and you could have done it. So there was these other things around confidence and motivation, which was very important. So, and we do try really hard, as any business should, to align our own business model and how we make money with good outcomes for our customers and our investors. So that's sort of the shape of it with regards to practically how we actually make money. So we have transaction fees on buying and selling of shares and ETFs, and we also have some arrangements with companies. So in New Zealand in particular, and we're sort of growing into this in Australia, we support companies with better relationships with their shareholders and also with their staff through through company share plans and that type of thing. And then we also offer managed funds and funds as well. So we have distribution effectively on behalf of fund managers for those. So that's how we make money. With regards to the access for everyone, the vision of Sharesies is the same. Money opportunities for someone with $5 and $5 million, and that's vision's more or less been the same since we started the company. We started at 50 and 50,000, and just ended up that 50 wasn't low enough, and with this technology, why shouldn't it be lower? And 50,000 was not high enough because people with $50,000 still felt very left out. So what we think about with that is just every time is why can't we make it available for someone $5? And if you're making it available, then it also has to be available commercially. So that's why we have a subscription model, which we have in New Zealand and that we are going to be introducing into Australia. So people can effectively have a regular plan, which enables them to do auto investing, we call it, and other types of investing on their choice within a cap. And then also we have a percentage. Basically all our fees are capped. So as opposed to a flat fee or a fee plus, which tends to be the traditional models for pricing, what I mean by that is you might say, hey, it's $10 per trade, or it's $10 plus 0.3% or something like that. It tends to be the traditional model. We've got a up to, in Australia, for example, it's $6 for an Australian share, a maximum. So that enables people to invest with whatever amount they've got, whether it's $1 or $2 or whatever that is. So we've always worked really hard on enabling that. From a technology end, that's not very complicated at all. It doesn't, computers don't care if you do one of a share or one of a share. Like, it's all the other things around it that were hard. Things like licensing or regulation can be quite complicated around that, and also the existing commercial arrangements of financial services, which have all been around really serving those bigger customers and the larger ones, and as a result didn't support the idea of lots and lots of transactions at smaller amounts. So those are the parts we've really sort of had to break down for the business model there.
I love the explainer. There's obviously in a competitive market, you've got to differentiate yourself, and that comes with like multiple different things. And some people are price conscious, other people aren't, and it's more than that, right? As you said. So, Sonya, I think I've got the most recent numbers it's the most recent numbers that I could find at around 575,000 investors using the Sharesies platform in Australia and New Zealand, which is, if that's true, that's an incredible number, right? That's so many people investing, which is like, hats off to you guys. It's so awesome. I guess like building something at that scale, crossing the pond as well, like how does that happen, I guess?
Yeah. And we're still finding out how, but yes, those numbers are correct. And I think, the first thing first is you've got to connect with people. So as I said, it starts with really understanding the problem that people have, and then being really really committed to building a solution that meets those needs. And that has changed over time. Like, the first version of our product was 6 exchange traded funds available, but that met the needs of that audience. To begin with, it allowed us that first start. It allowed us to test whether people would invest if there was a platform that removed the minimum, made it accessible, and provided a bit of support and education and storytelling around it. So I think the first thing, one of the challenges was that cultural change, that people didn't see themselves as investors, or that investing was something that everyone did, or could be something that everyone did. And that's such an ingrained cultural narrative that we were really aware that we had to overcome if we wanted to be successful here. And so that, what that really meant was we've always just been had a relentless focus on our customer and understanding their needs, a two-way conversation, because we're on this path to creating financial empowerment, and that happens one step at a time, and people really need to feel that. So, and that speaks to our internal and external approach to how we do things. You know, we equally spend as much time explaining things internally as a team. You'll see that and how we approach it. We try to cut the jargon in our business as much as possible because that's what's important to our customers too. And so it's really just like, how do you create this this focus on what you're actually delivering for your customers and continue evolving that over time. We definitely don't think we're done in solving, and probably it's going to be our life's work. Like, we hope Sharesies is an intergenerational company because, but we hope that the problems or the ways of solving those problems are what changes over time. And then, you know, as well as that, there's been the how of running a business. So there's the what and the why, which is our mission, but we've had to learn how to build and grow a team in New Zealand and globally at a time that has been incredibly volatile. So so as for growing the team, you know, we like, that's such an important part. We grew and did grow quite fast, and it was really important that we and like kept central to what it meant to be Sharesies, and that those values of how we were running the company really could echo through the whole company. So even you know, Leighton touched on earlier, when the 6 of us started working together, what are some of the things we had in place for us to work really well? We then, you know, those things were putting in place our values. We spent some time going, what type of company are we trying to build here? What do we could either, it could happen by accident or it could happen by design. So let's get ahead of this and start talking about it. And our values have allowed us to really like grow our team but stay on the same page. And those are chase remarkable, and that's about doing things that are worth remarking on. And the key there is in the word chase, which means we don't arrive at being remarkable, or we're not being, you know, it's about always chasing what that looks like and redesigning that every day. In it together, that we really believe that teams do things and always care. So putting care into our work and caring for each other, but also caring for our customers, our stakeholders, everyone around us. So those are kind of some of the challenges. And then obviously the environment that we've been in, you know, going international.
Through COVID.
You know, that's been things like, you know, it'd be hard to find a business not impacted by that. And that's just around like constantly reevaluating our approach. And taking a long-term lens, but really executing on that a day at a time.
I love that. I was actually listening to a podcast this morning on my way into the city with, I think it was Howard Schultz, who's not technically the founder of Starbucks, but like the CEO. And there's some phrase I think that he said, which was like, don't try to be the best, just show everyone you care. And through that caring, you actually become the best because you always care. You always show people that you care. And so I love that as like that word care for your community, for your customers, for your team. Like, I think that kind of, it's like in the Sharesies team, from the Sharesies team that I've met, it's definitely evident. So I think maybe there's like the spring of that comes from that original 6 where you guys had to deal with that together. And then maybe having that kind of build out from there is actually, I'll say, easier from where I sit, but I'm sure there, as you mentioned, many obstacles. Like, building that out was actually easier because you'd already fostered that as a group. So building from a group is probably, maybe in my sense, maybe it's easier than building from a singular person who has a vision and is trying hard to articulate that, but doesn't have that sounding board earlier on like you guys had. And so you can carry that with you as you grow, which is really cool. But Leighton, I know, like, being a finance person, I know the Australian regulatory environment is a nightmare. That's how I can phrase it. You don't have to phrase it that way.
I'd prefer not to, if that's okay.
But like, from someone who's trying to provide financial education every day, I know how difficult it is. Maybe that's the way I can phrase it. How difficult and complicated it can seem. So what were some of the obstacles, even if it's not that, like some of the obstacles coming to Australia other than team, which Sonya just touched on, and building that culture? Is there anything else that you would call out?
Look, I mean, there's no doubt that regulation's up there with a challenge, right? And let's be honest, like, it's supposed to be a barrier.
Yeah, true.
Bad actors, or whatever that is. And I think sometimes when we get frustrated in that part of the world, what regulation doesn't take into account is good intent, because firstly, businesses last longer than any one person and longer than any intent, and people can change, right? So for all sorts of reasons, and there's lots of examples where unpoliced good intent has gone really wrong. But that's not to say that when you are just trying to do something good in innovation, and even quite aligned with what where regulators are trying to head, it can still be really challenging and massive barriers to companies and innovation to get going and get ahead. So that has been really hard. Building a team in Australia. So you mentioned Brendan earlier. He's our country manager. We were very lucky to find him. And in the end, it seemed like a sort of meant to be situation, all these random connections. He tells a story of Brooke and I moved to Sydney when we were trying to hire a country manager after a couple of failed online events attempts, and we were walking past him on the street on the way to work. So it's just like these real funny stories like that just before we interviewed him that day. So he obviously Googled us or something, knew what we looked like. But hiring has been challenging up until we got Brendan. But then even once we did have him, we ended up in lockdowns for quite some time. So it's like the connection was way harder. As we know, like, humans still like to be face to face, right? It's still a way better way of building relationships than over the internet, even though we use these tools so much better now. In my opinion, anyway, still just much better to have that connection. So that's been challenging. And finally, like, the markets are close enough to be dangerous, New Zealand and Australia, right? Like, you can often think about the way we behave, consume things, all these types of things as people talk about cousins, brother sister relationship, or whatever that term people might use for it. But in reality, it's actually just really different. The mindset is different. The way people consume things, and the way people invest in all those is different. So, and we have, in my case, not quite Sonia's case, but nearly Sonia's case, 35 years of experience of the New Zealand psyche and how that works and everything. And we just didn't have that in the same way for Australia. Talk about regulatory regimes, like, we've worked in financial services in New Zealand, so we understand how that works much better than what we know about Australia, or what we knew about previously. So we've had to work really, really hard on that. And I would say, speaking honestly, we made some cliched mistakes when we first entered Australia with regards to how similar, or how we approached it, what ended up being a much larger market. And I think we've learned very quickly through necessity that there's different ways to do it, and that we just need to play a more steady game, learn, get customers on board, solve the problem for the customers, and make sure that they actually want to tell their friends about it. And that's just a far better way of building a business. And to be honest, it's exactly how we built the business in New Zealand. So we sort of ended up in a situation of in a really crude sense, trying to buy customers, and it's just not a great way to do it. You got to earn that relationship, and with financial services more so than anything, I think. So, quite a few differences, and there are quite a few challenges, but I feel like we've really got some good momentum now, and we've taken some good learnings, and a few humbling learnings along the way as well.
So that's interesting. Like, one of the questions that I wanted to get across to you guys, and either of you could chime in on this, but it's just this idea of, like, the big picture goals. Like, people, when you do, like, the VC funding, or you speak to investors, or even just people they want to know, like, well, why are you doing this? Like, what's the big picture? Like, what do you envisage? Are you guys fans of that way of thinking? Because I know a lot of people aren't. A lot of people just like the process, and they set, like, monthly or quarterly goals at most. They don't really think too far ahead. They just kind of go, I know I want to go in that general direction, but I don't really have a goal in mind. Maybe, Leighton, we'll start with you. How do you think about that?
I think one thing Brooke, Sonya, and I are probably very aligned on is big picture.
Okay.
and to a different extent and in a different way, Richard, Martin, and Ben were similar. Although I think they struggled a little bit sometimes, maybe with the ambition or the idea. But every now and again, we pulled it off. So like I had this really interesting conversation because people really don't like it in teams often. And again, I'm speaking generically, but a lot of people really struggle with the big picture, and they feel like it's impossible, and as a result, why bother working towards it? Or you do hear these sort of rhetorics quite often as leaders, and it's something I personally really struggle with because I think, I guess because Brooke, Sonya, and I are quite similar in that, and we have these big, and we love talking about what it could be, and then working towards it in that respect. Not wanting to put too many words in Sonia's mouth here as well, because I'm sure she's got her own views, but it's been so key to Sharesies getting ahead and where we're trying to get to. So I just really encourage, and I have conversations with the team all the time on why that's important. We had a really funny one that I'm sure this person won't mind me sharing, but it was sort of put to me at a sort of Friday night demo and drink situation the other day, that is there a risk that Sharesies culture becomes a lot more like a bank as we get larger, and look, there's lots of great things about bank culture, to be honest. I think sometimes they get a hard rep because they're clearly very good commercial models, right? And by and large, they're very well trusted, particularly in New Zealand, and I think to a similar extent in Australia and stuff as well. But there are some things that, as a company our size, you just don't want to be compared to in that same way. Like it's different, right? And for me, so much of that comes down to how you set goals. And from my time in banking, it was very seldom we ever set a goal that we didn't think that we would pretty much definitely hit. And at Sharesies, we regularly hit a goal that's just always feels too stretchy. Just shouldn't be doesn't need to be. I never see them as impossible, but they always feel hard enough to think like, probably we'll miss that in my logical brain, right? And the sort of creative and excited part of my brain says, actually, but what if we did? What if we did? What if we got it? And every now and again we do. And I sort of just put it back. I was like, look, if we just prior to this conversation, we'd had one around stretchy goals, and this person thinking it was time we stopped that. And in my view, if you want to create a culture like a bank or something, then you start setting goals like them. So if we want to continue being ambitious and trying to innovate and really change the way some of this stuff works, then we have to have that vision and share that widely. So it's a very long way of saying, yeah, I'm a massive fan of big goals and big thinking. But so I'll let you share your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's a huge motivator. Like I like the part, Leighton touched on being a fun tech before, but to me, like a big part of what we're doing, especially when you're creating something that the solutions don't exist yet, right? Otherwise there would be financial empowerment and everyone would be financially empowered. So like a big part of what we're doing is imagining a future that doesn't exist. And like I just think that people sometimes can undercook the power of imagination and for creating a future, and it all of a sudden then puts you in the driver's seat because you realize that cool, life could be happening to us, but actually once you've got a picture or a vision of something you want, you're going to try and make steps to get there, and you're going to overcome barriers that are in your way because the prize is worth it. And I think around that, like sometimes it's just about describing a future so awesome that people will overcome to get there, or because it's no doubt challenging, building a business and things like that. And I think actually that speaks to as well the journey that our investors go on, where it's like you're having to put away some money, maybe you'd prefer to spend it, but actually that future you want for yourself looks a little bit different, and it's so unique to you. So I kind of like it to just going, imagine that future for yourself. It's the same for us in a business, but I think it's also a huge motivator when it comes to money, and because it helps you go, and it helps you kind of get over those short-term gratification and helps you get long-term gratification, and it's just so much sweeter once you actually get there, or even if you mystify a little bit, you're further than what you would have got otherwise. So yeah,
I like that because like what you're trying to do is change the industry. It's such a big ambitious task, right? To say, you should be able to access this, you should be able to do this, you should be able to make life fun and enjoyable, and you should be confident when you invest and do all these types of things. And encouraging your team to think, like, how is this going to change your life? What's your vision of this future? I think that's a really key part, because it's very easy to get bogged down in the day-to-day of like customer, queries or frustrations or feedback. And then you go into this big picture meeting and you think, well, I just had a conversation with like 3 people and they weren't happy. But then you're telling me this thing over here and you're like, yes, but that's why we need to change it. And you can get that kind of internal friction there. Do you guys do any type of like regular all hands, or do you do like retreats or catch ups, or like any type of thing that maybe just like resets people and gives them opportunity to buy into the picture?
Yeah, we try really hard to do that. So we do an all hands once a fortnight, and we do a strategy day once a year. So we've actually just done one. So we had the whole team in Wellington, and had a great day together. Chance to, and they're primarily connection days and big thinking days, and sort of setting of. I made the mistake actually even right then of calling it a strategy day, because it's not necessarily what it is. Like, strategy happens, like we just don't vocalize a strategy or something like that, right? We share a vision and a story and stuff, and then the team create a strategy. And so we actually, the last one was called In It Together Day, or Mahi Tahi Day. So it's a chance to connect and create those again. And particularly for those that aren't, or actually not even just for those that aren't in the office, but we're in a building where we're separated across like 5 floors, I think. So we have like 30 people on the floor, and it's I personally am not a big fan of that. I'd way rather a bigger floor plate, but economic environments and all that sort of stuff, like, it's not a great priority for businesses right now. But like, I think having everyone in a room for those days is so amazing with regards to like showing like the power of what a company can be, because 160 people, you have everyone there. It just feels so big and so strong, I think, and as opposed to how siloed it feels elsewhere in your life, so elsewhere in the day-to-day. So that's another great reason for bringing it together. But yeah, we definitely do them, and definitely benefit of having Brooke, Sonya, and I suppose, is we've got 3 people, so we should have 3 times the chance, I suppose, of sharing those messages and giving people that sort of direct relationship to the vision and the purpose and the strategy of where we're trying to head. So we do try and make the most of that.
I might just put you guys to the test a bit here. I've always been impressed with Sharesies marketing. I always think you guys just hit it in terms of like everything from the design and how people feel when they see the brand, and how you guys communicate here today, how people experience it on social media or wherever, even on the platform. So I was going to put 3 of you to the test, but even it will still work with 2 of you. And maybe Sonya, will start with you. So Leighton, you've got the harder one because you come second in this little test. I just need you to pick one of the marketing strategies, or like one of the platforms, or however you want to think about something that's worked for you in the past that maybe other people listening to this can think in their businesses or in their whoever they work for or whatever. Maybe they can take away and be like, oh, that's a really interesting way of thinking about it. But like, a lot of people would envy what you guys have created and how you did it at scale. I think I could be mistaken, but I feel like it was during COVID. I think I read an NZ Herald article where it was like, you guys like 5x'd your customers or something crazy like this. And I was like, wow, that's a huge number. Obviously COVID and all that was in the mix there. But so starting with you, if you could pick one of those platforms or one of those channels to use to grow the business, if you did it again, which one would it be?
Yeah, and I think people can see marketing in such different ways, and I think that's really interesting. Like, one of them is like trying to tell people about yourself. Like, people have to know you, right? To then want to use your product and at all connect with your business. But it probably, my view, touches on what Leighton talked about earlier around like buying customers, and how like, I'm a firm believer that your marketing is an extension of your product. It's just a way of it, like, that's a good view. It's a good place to start from, because no one kind of wants to be the junk mail catalog that arrives in your mail. And I think there's heaps of online equivalent of that now. I use the Very Real one, but I definitely see my online feeds feeling like that. And so I love the view that more so than ever, we're able to build community online and build really strong connections. So I really like the social tools that can do that and support that. And that community is a real core part of building a business, and that sits with what enables two-way conversation, because it's equally as important for your customers to talk to you as it is for you to talk with you as it is for you to talk with them, but seeing it as a real value exchange. So how is this content or whatever you're creating adding value to this person? Because so it's that's a really cool part of where I see the value in growing an audience, is through creating something of value, and then more and more people seek you out. But and so that's great over the long term. I think coming down to platform, I always feel a bit like, oh, the platforms change so much, and I'm just not one of those people who is like die hard on a platform or is up to date with the latest platforms or things like that. But one thing I have seen shift is groups. Facebook groups is a key way to enable people to be able to communicate and customers to be able to talk with each other too, which is a really valuable thing. But one thing I'm seeing is people shifting towards their platforms to be more on the private spaces, like Slack and Distill is really interesting. So they're actually taking them off these public platforms and putting them on ones where they can create more, have more control, I guess, over enabling that conversation, and things, know that the rules aren't going to change overnight on them and they're going to lose all their audience. Or so I think
That's
more
cool.
what I'm seeing is, or what I'm intrigued by is instead of this thing of being like going where your audience is as far as the platform is to being like, actually, if you create something valuable, people will come to people will come to you. So it's like that's something I'm intrigued by, and probably would continue to pull on over time.
I like it. This is kind of just like me just getting some free insights from experts. So I'll indulge one more time with Leighton here. So what would you say, mate? Like what works for you, I guess, even?
Yeah, I'll first touch on Sonya and social media. Her TikTok channel's off the chain, by the way. She's well followed on there. Quite a few dances around investing and stuff.
I don't have TikTok, just before anyone else goes and tries to find it. But probably I should create one after this.
Yeah.
That would probably be more Brooke's game, to be honest, but she's not here to defend herself. So. I think, like Sonya, way more than platform, it's like what are you trying to achieve? So, and you've got to get really close to that early. And I think one of the things we observed very quickly at Sharesies, through customer research, to be honest, the customers will tell you if you speak to enough of them, was that trust was going to be the key thing that we could build. And we saw that in so many different aspects of, for example, at Sharesies trades, I don't know how many millions of dollars every day now, right? But quite a few. And it took us like 3 months, I think, maybe, till we had $1 million total go through the platform, which sounds like a big number still. In fact, it got made a headline at the time, but it's sort of like a comically small number if you think about actually being able to create a business. But what it represented was this build of trust. And I remember about 3 or 4 weeks in, a customer put $10,000 into the platform. Up until then, like, we were sort of strictly in the $30 to $50 type deposit range. And then they withdrew it the next day. And for context, at the time, I saw every single deposit and withdrawal that went out of the platform. Every single one. No one got by me. So I got on the phone to call the customer and be like, hey, I noticed that you've made this withdrawal. Can you just, I don't hound everyone, but this could be money, by the way. We were just a few weeks old, and called them up, and they said, oh, look, I just panicked overnight, your brand new platform. And I just thought this is a lot of money for me. And I didn't think I could quite do that, and I thought it was just another example. Again, $10,000 now, probably 10,000 people a day make a deposit of that size, and it was just these constant things of trust. So for other platforms, it might be engagement, it might be you got to find whatever word it needs, but for financial services, it was trust. So we put ourselves out there a lot. So it was like, well, if Sharesies is going down, isn't trustworthy, then there's at least 6 people that are going down with it because people can really create that PR. So putting out, trying to get as much in the news and that type of information as we could, and then connecting with a board as well, like bringing people onto our board that would also really widen that trust. I remember it was an early Reddit thread, people looking through, is this legit, those types of conversations on it. And someone went and looked not only at our CVs based on the company's office and could see our names, but also our sole independent director at the time, Alison Geary. She's still our chair, but she was also a director of a bank and an airline and a couple of other big listed companies. So you can we just really focused on creating trust that way, and then through blogs and storytelling. So it doesn't give you an answer for
it's great.
Platform at all, but it does say, look, what is the one thing that you need to make people engage with your business? And for us, I really think that was trust, and it remains true in what we do in Australia right now. And that's just, it can be really broad, like trust, right? But leaning into, we used a lot of video. You talked about COVID. We did a lot of that. Sonya and I actually did a podcast every day, Sonya, I can't remember, or every week, whatever it was, and it got really popular. But again, it was us putting ourselves out there, and now we do less of that ourselves, except for when there's changes that the community aren't happy with in the platform or something. Then we always front up and put ourselves out there for, and ask me anything or whatever it is. So just trying to be really visible and brave with regards to that and human.
Yeah, that's great. I've got a couple more questions for you, which maybe let me stay with you, which is just like, obviously, like being in a relationship while being in a business, oftentimes there's a lot of separation between work life and home life and personal life, and people really value that, because it's almost like when you're playing sport, you step over the line, you become a different person. It's like when you step into work, you can put on the professional face, and then you go home, you switch off, and then you can allow your mind just to relax and be calm and enjoy different parts of life. I'm just curious how you've worked through that as a professional, as someone is also in, like, obviously doing this type of thing, like the media and that sort of stuff, like how you think about that, and if you have any guidance for other people who may be in a relationship with someone that they work with as well.
Firstly, like the work-life balance and separation, all that type of thing. Brooke and I we gave up on that a long time ago. We talk about work-life harmony. That a thing that we're very passionate about. We've got 2 young kids as well, but very passionate about Sharesies, like, and like a third baby in our life in some ways, I suppose. It's like, it's talked about often. We enjoy its ups and we struggle with its downs sometimes, and its tantrums or whatever in between. But ultimately, like, there was 2, so Sonya and Ben as well, in a relationship when, and still are, when we started Sharesies. And again, it wasn't something that a lot of people liked. Like, some people were like, no, stay away from it. And you hear a lot of stories as well of people who go into start a company, which is a big strain on a relationship if you start it and it's only one of you in there. And I don't think it's ever been a big strain on our relationship, but I think it would be if it was just one of us in there. It's like you're both in it. You have the same work stories, I suppose. You can talk about it. And I'm not saying everyone has to do it with your partner or whatever. That's definitely not what I'm saying. I'm just saying whatever works for people, works. And the tips from me are, we do say if we just can't be bothered talking about work, and so that I'd say at least once or twice a week, at least both of us probably actually use that and say, look, I just don't want to talk about it at the moment. So it's like, okay, cool, you go and mull over it somewhere, and that's just completely respected. And then I don't know, I don't have that much more to say, because it's sort of the only way we've known it, but can't imagine it not being like that either.
Yeah. Sonya, do you ever feel something like, do you feel something similar? Is there ever like an issue with it, or do you see it as like an advantage?
I definitely saw it as an advantage early on, like, and actually, like, because Ben's just left the business, so it's really interesting, kind of navigating what it's like to not work together as well, because it has been that way when it is such a big part of your life. But I think probably as well, it's for the people who choose that life. I do think it's a choice to do that, and even to start a business. I'm aware that it's not a choice everyone can have, and that it's privileged to have that choice. But I think if you're in a position and you're wanting to start a business, like that in itself, you've kind of the work-life harmony is how you see it, and you're probably one of those people. Like, I enjoy my work. I'm very lucky to enjoy my work, and I get a lot out of it, and so sometimes it doesn't feel like a chore. So when you are fizzing about that thing and you're starting up and you're working together, it's really awesome, because it can kind of build that momentum as well, and you've got someone who you can talk about this really important thing in your life together and be on that same page. And where I think it helps is there's often people talk about what really healthy culture teams look like, and it's not necessarily people always agreeing or people sitting there and having these really pleasant conversations. Sometimes what you witness in really actually healthy teams is lots of disagreement, lots of people really passionate about what they're saying, what might look like arguing, or but it's passion, right? And I think that we get really used to navigating those things in our personal life with people, because it's your life, it's you're making these value-based choices. And I guess what that does is it translates to work as well. And you can have these really honest conversations. You can put your view out there. You're respected. It's quite safe. And I think that that's actually really important for all teams to get there, because I do think it makes the work better. And so I think definitely being able to go there with people was very, very important to me anyway, early on, because it can, when you are starting as a new team, you have to build that trust and build that respect to be able to go there. Whereas when you start a business with someone that you're with, you're already there.
Yeah, for sure. I actually, maybe just one final question on culture, if I may, is like, I look at what you guys have created, and it's like really inclusive from the brand internally, etc. I'm curious, and this is maybe a polarizing question, but being so inclusive, focusing on things like equality, all really important things, right? But has that led to any drawbacks in business performance or anything like this? And what I'm trying to do is kind of like debunk some myths, or just think critically about this, or if you have any advice for people and expectations around building a business this way and what it means.
Yeah.
Sorry, you go, Leighton.
Yeah, I mean, Sharesies is like, you're right about all of those things. We care about them all. We're a B Corp. But like, people ultimately are going to achieve most of, there's 6 of us as founders, 160. We clearly don't do most of the work now, right? So you need to trust and develop and support those people to do their best work. So sort of that's what it comes down to. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, I can't really think of any drawbacks. Like, I do think as such, it's just like I don't know how you could operate. Like I can't picture us operating without that. Like, why, our big why, our mission, is what we do, but how we do is also so important to us. And I think, it comes back to that point I was talking about, imagination and how the power of that in being able to create the future. But I also think in the how, what needs to exist to be able to support big picture thinking and big picture execution is also an environment where people feel that they can thrive. And that's very nuanced to create. But I don't know, Owen, if you think about a time where you were somewhere that you didn't fit in necessarily, and how much of your headspace went into like trying to either fit in or navigate, like, do I even care about fitting in? Or like, we're social people and we're trying to exist somewhere together. And I think once you remove that, if you fit in somewhere, you're bringing more of yourself, you're bringing, that's a whole lot of that problem solving space just disappears. And all of a sudden you can get on to thinking about those big picture goals. And you're in that thriving part of life where you're thinking, you feel that you can make an impact, you feel like you can make a change. So, for what we're doing, we need people to be thinking and feeling like that. We need our investors to be thinking and feeling like that, because that's not how they've been feeling. So we equally, what we try to create internally is also then the life that we're trying to create externally, where our customers believe that too, where they believe that they can be empowered, where they believe that they can have the future that they want to have for themselves. And that really everything else is just a tool to help them get there. It's so much about a mindset. Because sometimes we're stereotyped and we don't even know that we are, and that just puts barriers around us. And so the more we can kind of lift that and create that, like, that's really, to me, the key to empowerment anyway.
Yeah, it's just something that, like, we talk about a lot as business owners, and you see it more in like the tech side of things, where there are a lot of different cultural benefits to being in certain businesses. And I can, like, we see that oftentimes we are what we eat, or like we build who we are. And I can see that based on, like, again, the interactions that I have with people in your business, and then how people from the outside perceive it and who uses the platform, and people feeling like they're welcome, and people feeling like they're able to do this thing that maybe they've been put off by for so long. So I just wanted to see if there was any downsides, or if there was anything like that, but I couldn't think of any myself. That's what I was seeing if you guys knew any. But finally, like, you guys have written a book, right? The Sharesies Guide to Investing, and the subject line is that it's your roadmap to financial freedom, right? And I'm curious, like, I know who the book is for, but I'm curious to ask who you think the book is for and what they'd get out of it. Given that you already do so much, right? You already do so much with the platform, with financial education, with content, and just spreading the message generally. But who did you envisage would pick this book up and use it to help themselves?
Yeah, I think it comes back to, like, so much, we had that earlier platform conversation about, who's where and how that's all changing. But often, picking up a book or being given a book, you feel like you've got everything you need in that one place to be able to get on and do something. Because the internet can be, a scary place. You can get lost. You're like, am I an expert now? Do I know all the things I need to know? So I think the book really is for someone who's intrigued, interested, and wants to feel that they've got a good, like, they've got the tool to give them their first step into being an investor, and that if they kind of settle in with that should be enough to get them started on that journey. And we wrote it because we're huge. A big part of what we do is access to information is really, really important, and making sure that information is accessible in different forms as well. I remember giving most of my education to do with finance or money was being given a book, or being as a young person. I think what's interesting is, like, we saw a gap to make sure it was relatable to today's context. And also, when I was reading books about investing as a teenager or money, I didn't then have the platform to be able to actually execute on that. What I was learning, I would have to have saved up heaps of money. So I think what's really cool as well is being able to not only provide the information, but also now that we're at a time where platforms exist, where you can actually put into play what you're learning in the books.
I love that idea of, like, giving something, like the actual gift, like the gift of that is really important. It's like a gesture. You can take this home with you, and it can be like a companion that people take. And I think that is, as we move into this era where so much is online or even artificially driven these days, to have the opportunity to just hand something to someone where they can actually just, like, switch off from all those things around them and focus on on what's in front of them is really important. And it's a great gift, even if it doesn't hit with everyone. Even if 1 in 10 actually read the book cover to cover, maybe that changes a family, not just an individual's life, and their kids and their kids. So that's great. So there'll be a link in the show notes to anyone that's watching or listening. You can go and pick that up, and we will do a giveaway. We normally do a giveaway on the Rask channels whenever we have authors on the show. So we'll do a giveaway in coming weeks because we love that feeling of giving that to people as well. So check it out. It's a great one. Lovely cover as well. Final question for both of you. If you could go back and just give your younger selves one piece of advice, and it could be on money, finance, or investing, or business, or whatever you want to talk about. Like, what would you be telling yourself if you were maybe before the Sharesies journey? Maybe, Leighton, we'll start with you. What would you have said?
Before the Sharesies journey? So hard, because I just sort of think like things work out because they work out, and like right now I think it's tough economic environment and all that sort of thing, but again, like I wouldn't change any, like there's lots of decisions we could have made differently which would have changed everything about how it's going right now, but we did them for the information we had at the time. So I mean I guess it would be in some ways just stick to your guns on that, because and within reason I had that view anyway, I suppose, which is like you just got to give something a go. And then like I'm just such a massive believer in momentum, which is like it doesn't matter how big the thing is, you just got to start moving towards it in some way. And it doesn't matter, doesn't matter if you go sideways first or even a little bit backwards, whatever it is, as long as in your head you think you're going towards it. Like so yeah, I think we'll just be stick with that as a mentality, and hopefully it'll work out hard. And, to be honest, I'm telling myself the same thing at the moment when things are a little bit more challenging.
Yeah.
For lots of reasons.
Yeah. I love that, mate. Progress over perfection is, it's such an important piece of advice for anyone in life and in work and wherever you go. How about you, Sonya? One thing that you would tell yourself?
Yeah, I think, and it probably matches my, financial thoughts as well as business thoughts, which is just like cutting yourself some slack when it's your day one. It's like you don't need to know it all on day one. You don't need to be someone to do something. I think so for finance, like I wish I started earlier. I wish I started investing ages ago. And I wish I didn't have to think I had to be someone before that, before I could really just start doing that thing. And I think the same with being in business. One of the things I tell myself constantly is, especially because you're put in these situations where you feel like you have to know the answer. And I think, or more so that's where your position in the world, as things grow, you're like, well, I should know this level now. Whereas really, I get so much joy out of being a learner, not a knower, and how to kind of keep that with you as you grow. And no one actually looks at you and expects you to know the answer. And so the thing I tell myself constantly is knowing how to get an answer is more important than knowing an answer. And because the problems are going to change, what comes up is going to change. And really, it's like, who have you got with you? Have you got a great support network and rely on, the people around you, because people want to see you succeed and they will help you. And people have such broad experience. And so whatever you're up against, someone has got something to add to that, to how you want to think about that. So just kind of like being okay in that unknown space, and kind of trusting yourself earlier to have it.
I love that, to plug the investing part as well, which we should while we're here on, but that gets started.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got a real croaky voice, but people like still throw up barriers all the time for other people on why you shouldn't do something, like whether it's fees or that platform's not for you or whatever. It's so much garbage, I think. Like it'll like you just start, and that's where the value is for so long. You can start worrying about all these other aspects probably 10 years from now, honestly. And if you can just relieve yourself of all that stress for 10 years, imagine how many more people would get going. Because it all just does not matter. Like, it drives me nuts when people go on about all this due diligence and all this sort of stuff you need to do. Like, of course, you need to, actually you just need to do something that you can afford, right? And just give it a go. You'll learn. And like I say, if you go backwards for a little bit, it doesn't matter, because you'll learn so much, and then you can start. It's all nothing. None of that matters. And if you start now, then when it does matter, you just by nature of doing it, you have the skills to. No different to anything else we learn. So,
and it's kind of that thing of like, if you kind of can look at an expert and you can go, oh, an expert, but every expert has a day one. Like, we're surrounded by houses, but everyone was an apprentice once, and had their first day of work. And so it's kind of that thing of going, you'll only get, where are you trying to go with something, and not, the only way to get there really is by starting and to be on that journey.
Yeah, I love that. Such a good way, a fitting way to end the show, guys. I really do appreciate you taking the time to join me today, to join me from across the pond. And hopefully I get to meet you in person, because that would be lovely one day soon. But in the meantime, I'll make do with the Sharesies Australia team and getting to know them. So once again, I really appreciate you both taking some time out of your day.
Great. Thanks for having me.